Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You know, the word agents right now, it's absolutely everywhere, right? But when you cut back from the hype, what does it actually mean to have AI that acts?
Well, very good question. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. As Jennifer was saying, everyone's talking all about agents. It's been the new flavor of the town in the past year or two. And academically and scientifically, what agents were supposed to be are these AIs that are actually grounded in a given environment, that they can perceive it and understand it, and off of that perception start manipulating that given environment by taking actions and whatnot, that then creates this feedback loop to actually improve itself over time. So that is the real scientific way that agents are supposed to be. But of course, as it goes with any AI marketing terminology, it's getting thrown, at anything and everything in the AI space. But AIs that actually can act given the perception and can improve over time are the real genuine agents, which is exactly what my scientific background has been and what we do at Parikh.
Great. Do you two want to chime in too what this means for your companies and for you?
Yeah, So I knew that Nasrin sort of has a bit of an allergy to the term agent. And so I was prepared to push back on but actually, yeah, I agree with this definition. And so a lot of these, so at Utori, we are working on web agents. And so these are agents that are interacting with the web. They're taking actions on the web. They're changing the state of the web and then reacting to what they are perceiving. So sort of map over the definition that Nasrin just shared. And yeah, so I think that that fits well with how I think of it as well. Sequential decision making, taking actions, dealing with the consequences of the actions that you've taken, and this is a little bit in contrast to sort of chatbots where there is no larger environment within which you're interacting. It is your own tokens that you've produced, and you kind of keep going from there. But you're not changing the state of anything that's external to the model itself, and so maybe that's a distinction of AI that acts as opposed to just talks.
Yeah, and at Augment, we work on coding agents. And so I'd say what we've seen there is a big shift from products where the developer was driving all of the actions and the models were kind of assisting, to now when we have coding agents. I think the big advance that has happened, and it happened around the time of Sonnet 3.5, is that these models can now see what's going on in the environment, in this case in the form of reading files and reading command outputs, and then take actions such as writing code and running tests. And the thing we've seen is that that allows us to sort of close the feedback loop so that the agents can write code, they can test it themselves, and then they can continue iterating actually without any human involvement until the code works. And so that advancement in coding agents is what led to a lot of the growth that we're seeing right now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask questions that anybody can chime in on, if that's all right. I think the hardest part of building an agent is not so much figuring out the model, in my opinion. It's figuring out what a human really wants, and including the things that people didn't say they wanted. So how do you solve for intent? How do you build that into a product?
Perhaps I'll start us off of that. So we serve predominantly Fortune 500 enterprises, and within that, consumer retailers and consumer brands, who all of us are a consumer of. So all of us would go to a given .com website and try to scroll to find this one item that we are looking for. Like, let's say I'm looking for a dress that is like this color and has like a floral sleeve, something super particular. And right now, the status quo of finding that intent is just, what we're all putting up with, which is a dumb keyword search bar and a scroll to browse. And ultimately, one day, maybe you find what you want to do. And even worse experience as consumers is in the brick and mortar, right? We all walk into a given store and we are just fed up with all the aisles that you can browse through physically and manually, and there's no way to really find your way around and find that one item that you're looking for. So intent recognition is something that people that don't quite understand AI talk a lot about, but the truth is, in action, what it boils down to is being able to encode in a very, fuzzy, implicit way the sets of beliefs and desires and actions that a given user has historically taken, and model that so that the future transactions are going to be much more successful. So for us, the way to encode that, again, is one of the many parameters that we optimize for. It's not just about what the consumer wants. Like, ideally, it's also about what the retailer can offer at that particular moment, given the grounding of that environment, as I was explaining, being a physical store or, say, a given .com store. So it really boils down to being able to integrate with all the existing business workflows of a given retailer, with all the existing systems of records that they have, and unify it in the form of this AI native operating platform of ours, so that all of these building blocks end up capturing ultimately the consumer intent at a scale in the most beautiful and the most delightful way for us all to get to find that one item that we are looking for.
Guy, what about you? How do you think about building for intent?
I think encoding the place I go to is something called spec-driven development. So the idea there is that when a developer wants to use a coding agent to perform a non-trivial task, they don't just tell the agent what to do and the agent goes and does it, because often the agent gets the intent wrong. Instead, what you do is you work with the agent to come up with a plan or a spec, and then the developer looks at the plan, critiques it, iterates on the plan, and this can take quite a while. And then when they're happy with the plan, they tell the agent, okay, go and do this. And that's been, I'd say, the most effective way of capturing intent from developers before starting and launching on a long journey of editing, sometimes hundreds of files, and doing stuff that the developer never intended. So spec-driven development is the direction. And there are also hints of that in other products. Like, for example, if you look at deep research, all of the deep research products, I think today, ask clarifying questions before they go and work, right? And that's kind of like a mini example of spec-driven development. You're trying to get more information from the user to try to clarify intent before you go off on a long journey of discovery.
Absolutely. Devi, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think a few things related to what both of you have said. One is so we build for prosumers, we're building for individuals. And one is having a bit of an opinion on how you want to show up in the life of your user, like what is the value you are looking to add in their lives. And so that is one, that you're not just sort of approaching it as that like anything's possible and now we just need to figure out what you want. There is a bit of opinion on how we want to show up. The second is trying harder and harder to meet users where their context is, because that's when you sort of have the highest shot at being able to understand what it is that they're trying to do. And especially when you start doing things proactively, which is part of sort of we're working on, that what is it in your life that you need help with that we can start automating and executing on in the background. That's where it becomes even more relevant to make sure you're meeting users where the context is, so that when you're being proactive, you're being useful and you're not being annoying. And the third is making sure that feedback loop is very open, right? It's very easy for a user to just respond and give feedback and nudge agents in the direction that they want to sort of have the agents be productive in. So I think all these three help with just having a better shot at doing the thing that the user intended.
Absolutely. And I think something that's important to point out here is that everybody on the stage has, it's even in the title of one of the companies, right? This is about augmentation, collaboration. This is not intended to be about replacement. And so it begs another question, which is how you think about that dance between, we've all watched AI confidently go off and do things wrong. So like, where do humans step in? How do you plan that into a product for those handoffs?
That's a very good question. Let me give you a very concrete example. So in our case, one of the AIs that we have that is helping back office employees of retailers is this AI native product enrichment solution. So that product enrichment solution are these little AIs that you see are walking through out a database of all the hundreds of millions of products that a given retailer is ultimately trying to sell to all of us, and is trying to capture the accurate information of what the shape and color and attributes of a given product, like what I'm wearing is, and whether or not the sleeves are this height or that height. So our AI literally has this human machine collaboration, if you will, very intelligently. It loops in basically merchants to come in and step in to add the expert information where it doesn't know enough. And for instance, to give you a sense, whether or not what I'm wearing is hazmat friendly is not necessarily the cup of tea of a given AI, because it's a very particular bespoke thing that often is, again, needs that human intervention. So we have, as you know very well, Jennifer, tried to call AI or redefine AI as augmented intelligence since the beginning of our journey as a company at Parikh. And we really walk that talk every day, working with our consumer retailers and consumer brands, where we help their employees get augmented by our AI so that they can focus where they are the best at, and help our AI helpers to get better at the sidelines that they work on as well.
Yeah, I think we end up approaching it quite a bit based on just evals, that like having a sense for what this agent harness that we've built, what is it good at, and where it's not going to be able to just sort of autonomously finish the whole task end to end, and being intelligent about exactly that this chunk of thing in our evals we found works well enough, and it's okay to just sort of go all the way to completion. And here are the kinds of things where we do think that we can go to a certain extent, but then we need to pause, get input from the user before we sort of continue. And in some situations, the model just doesn't have all the information needed, right? Like you need information from the user to be able to complete a task. And so I think going back to that opinionated stance a little bit of building the product in a way where pieces that can just go to completion, pieces that need to pause for review, pieces where you need user input, pause for that, and make that very obvious to the user. So they know, like the thing that you want to avoid is surprises, right? You don't want the user to be surprised when something went all the way or it didn't. And so building the product in a way that users see what's happening and feel like they're in control at all points is how we tend to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say our experience has been very similar. It's from a product perspective, it's thinking about the observability and steerability of these agents. Like what does the user need to know about what the agent is doing as it's doing its job autonomously? And then what are the points where you want the user to, the developer in our case, to intervene and give the agent guidance? And we're seeing that part of the product evolve very rapidly. Again, from previously, if today most agents there's still a prompt box where a developer needs to go in and tell the agent what to do, and then there's some steps being taken, and then the developer needs to come in again. We're seeing a lot of companies try to now invert the way they're developing software and say, okay, agents are mostly driving the software development lifecycle at our company, but we're going to define certain points where developers need to come in and supervise. Like if there's a spec, if there's a design, if there's an implementation, if QA happened, these are the points where we want to pull in, let's say, a senior engineer. And so it's like taking control over the whole process and moving it to agents, but still having humans involved in those critical moments. And that's what we're trying to build our product around. And it's very challenging because the whole thing is evolving very rapidly as agents get better. Yeah.
And there's actually, I think, a interesting consequence of this, like this setup of humans, when should humans step in or not, and all of that. I feel like, and you should tell me what you think, but with coding agents, I feel like productivity has gone up significantly, but context switching has also gone up a lot, where you now have like 4 sessions running in parallel. You're waiting for one to end, you're checking in on the other, and you go back and forth. And so I feel like in some ways, days of engineers feel more fragmented than they would have otherwise. And I don't know if that's a matter of once models are good enough and humans just need to step in less is when the context switching goes down, or if this is just what coding looks like now, that it will just like, there will be no state of flow while coding, and it will just be a lot of back and forth. That I'm here to ask questions, but
100%. This is the situation now for developers who are trying to get the most out of coding agents. You're running multiple sessions in parallel, and it is exhausting. Like the context switching is just exhausting. It will get better, I'm pretty sure, because with agents being able to work for, it used to be they worked for like 20, 30 seconds. Now they work for like maybe 5, 10 minutes. But every iteration, they become more and more autonomous. And with also other advances like Ralph loops and things like that, you can actually get these coding agents to work for hours. And once they work for hours, there's not that much context switching anymore. It's more like if an agent hit a particularly hard patch in a task, then maybe you need to work closer with it for a while to get past it. But for the most, I believe and hope that this is a temporary situation, but the context switching is where we are right now for sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
Very interesting. It also begs another question. When you have AI taking action on your behalf, how are you all thinking about alignment now, and how has that changed with time?
So the truth is that the degree of automation and taking action on your behalf is not what everyone talks about yet. So let's focus on enterprise. Majority of Fortune 500 retailers to this day are still running a lot of their operations in an end-to-end way via spreadsheets, which is just crazy if you think about it, right? So a lot of everyday work is happening through, passing spreadsheets around. And if it was as easy as everyone is touting it to be, that, 95% of the coding is automated, and it's just now so easy to just turn it on, and AI is going to start, automatically, agentically take actions and go solve everything. If it was that easy, all these Fortune 500 companies would have done it. And guess what? It's not easy. And why is that? It is because technologically, AI isn't quite there yet for the last mile of it, which is to really deeply semantically understand things and be able to reason and ultimately do things at a scale, which is a future that we are all preparing for. So with that as the context, now back to the alignment question. If you're not thoughtful enough as practitioners that are building these AIs, that are building these, models ultimately in the form of solutions as to what future it's bringing upon us, we are missing out bigly, right? So although right now, as we speak, a lot of mundane processes are still manual, and because AI can't quite go and automatically replace all the mainframes that retailers every single day are still operating off of, with, COBOL being the language,
Right.
that future will come at us. And right now the focus should be on how to make it so that the controls and knobs are there. As I was saying, we have built all of our solutions at Vernic to have that human in the loop as an element, where you can ensure that AI can communicate with a human correspondent whose job is to basically oversee it at scale. And ultimately, the power is back on the enterprises to be able to dictate what is their governance and what are their basically policies around how they are going about securely deploying AIs in the hands of their consumers or ultimately their own back office employees.
Do you two want to weigh in on how alignment has changed in your work or not with this new era?
I'm trying to think to what extent it shifts as a consequence of being able to take actions versus not. I feel like a lot of the threads that have been talked about and are being worked on in alignment, I feel like still carry over.
Yeah.
So I'd have to give more thought to if there's anything specific about actions that changes it beyond just sort of generic automation.
Right. It depends on what you're doing, whether you're having to realign and at what frequency you're having to think about bringing things back to center or where you need them to be. Anything to add, Guy?
Yeah, I think so far we've seen small examples of what can happen when there's misalignment. So for example, if I want the agent to be in plan mode, I don't want it to edit files in my workspace.
Right.
I take away the edit file tool. But then models today are smart enough, and I've seen this happen, that they will use their terminal tool to edit the file anyway because they really want to edit that file, and I don't want them to, right? It's by the way a bit related to the intent question, right? Alignment, intent, these are kind of related things. So I would call that an example of misalignment or cheating. We've seen many other examples where, models are trained to make the tests pass. And then in the past, we've seen models do that by deleting tests or by changing the code in ways that only make the test pass but don't make the code correct. These things get better over time, but on the other hand, we're also giving these agents a lot more complex, sophisticated, and sometimes risky tasks to do over time. And so I feel like the way I look at it, there's a bit of a race between these things. Agents get more powerful. We give them more risky things to do. Labs are clearly working hard to get the models more and more aligned. And we're kind of often seeing examples where there's not quite of a solid match. So things are very much in flux right now, I would say, in terms of alignment. And again, in software development, we're now giving these agents a lot more opportunity to control whole systems, to spend a lot of money. I've had agents spend hundreds of dollars for me on VMs that I never intended to. And I got a day after, I was like, what? You didn't stop all of these VMs? Like, I thought we talked about this. And like, no, they're starting to be real world consequences for these things. I think over the next year, we're going to see a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we're in our final 45 seconds here. What's a piece of advice you want to leave the audience with?
Piece of advice for what? Sorry?
For the folks sitting
For
here.
the folks here. Well, the main question I always get asked as someone that started programming when I was, 10 years old is whether or not I should send my kids to school to study computer science anymore. And the answer is yes. Algorithmic thinking is not what AI can replace. And please send your kids to learn how to think broadly in terms of numbers and rationales, which is a skill that AI is not going to finesse anytime soon.
Anybody else? Final seconds? Want a last word?
I think be open to adapting. Like, the world is changing. It's very real. What's happening is very real. Yes, there's a lot of hype, a lot of marketing, but there is also a lot of real changes. And so keeping an open mind and open to adapting would be a good idea, I think.
That's a great thing to end on. Thank you all very, very much for this, and thank you all for being here.